This is an overview of Chapter 5 for Psychology 230, Entering the Social World, Social Emotional Development in Infancy and Early Childhood. The social emotional relationship that develops between an infant and a parent, usually the mother but not necessarily, is special. This is a baby's first relationship, and scientists and parents believe it should be satisfying and trouble-free to set the stage for later relationships. So, we'll be looking at important stages of early psychosocial development in this chapter. You were introduced to Erikson's stages of early psychosocial development in Chapter 1. And in this particular chapter, we're going to be concerned with these particular age groups, birth to 1 year, and I'll be explaining these different stages and crises that have to be resolved in the following slides. Also, we'll be looking at 1 to 3 years, 3 to 6 years, according to Erik Erikson's basic scheme. Here is another chart which might be helpful to you in terms of understanding Erikson's theory of stages of psychosocial development. And there is a video clip here for you to view as well if you would like to click on that. And I think that will be helpful to you. So let's look at stage 1. This is what Erikson defines as basic trust versus mistrust. Newborns leave the warmth and security of the uterus for an unfamiliar world, and when parents consistently respond to the newborn's needs, he or she develops trust. With a proper balance of trust and mistrust, infants develop hope, openness to new experiences, while knowing the possibility of danger. Stage 2, that's the tension between autonomy versus shame and doubt. Between 1 and 3 years of age, children understand that they can control their actions. With this understanding, children strive for autonomy, for independence from others. However, autonomy is counteracted by children's doubt that they can handle demanding situations, and by shame that may result from failure. A blend of autonomy, shame, and doubt gives rise to will, the knowledge that within limits, youngsters can act on their world intentionally. So I don't know if you've noticed at this point, Erikson's not suggesting that there should not be any difficulties in a child's life, that in fact having to handle demanding situations adds to the child's growth and maturity, but you want a balance of autonomy, shame, and doubt to give rise to that will in children. Stage 3 has to do with initiative versus guilt. Preschoolers start to explore the environment on their own, ask many questions about the world, and imagine possibilities for themselves. But this initiative is moderated by guilt, as children realize that their initiative may place them in conflict with others. They cannot pursue their ambitions with abandon. Purpose is achieved with a balance between individual initiative and willingness to cooperate with others. So as you read through the text in this chapter, you will be referring back to Erikson's stages of growth. Now, another important figure in helping us understanding child development is John Bowlby, who came up with the theory of attachment. And it would be helpful to you to click on this link to learn a little bit, to get a little preview to this theory of attachment according to John Bowlby. According to Bowlby, children who form an attachment, that is a close social emotional relationship with an adult, are more likely to survive. There are 4 phases in growth of attachment. From birth to 6 weeks, we have pre-attachment. Young babies rapidly learn to recognize their mother by smell and sound, which sets the stage for forging an attachment relationship. Evolution has endowed infants with many behaviors that elicit caregiving from an adult. So when a baby cries, smiles, or gazes at a parent, the parent usually smiles back or holds the baby. Infants' behaviors and the responses they evoke in adults create an interactive system that is the first step to forming an attachment relationship. The next stage in the growth of attachment, according to Bowlby, which occurs from about 6 to 8 weeks to 6 to 8 months, is attachment in the making. During these months, babies smile, laugh more often with the primary caregiver, and when babies are upset, they're usually more consoled by the primary caregiver. Babies are gradually identifying the primary caregiver as the person they can depend on when they're anxious or distressed. And then the next stage is true attachment, which occurs from about 6 to 8 to 18 months. By approximately this time, most infants have singled out the attachment figure, usually the mother, but not always. Infants trust their mother, who provides a stable socio-emotional base. This is why infants, like some children you may have observed, cry when separated from the attachment figure because they have lost their secure base. And then beginning at 18 months and on, we have reciprocal relationships. Infants' growing cognitive and language skills allow them to act as true partners in the attachment relationship. They often take the initiative in interactions and begin to understand parents' feelings and goals. Infants usually develop attachment with the mother first, but soon after it develops with the father. Attachment typically first develops between infants and their mothers, but the babies will soon become attached to their fathers too. Most fathers spend more time playing with their babies than taking care of them. Fathers emphasize physical play, whereas mothers spend more time reading and talking to babies, showing them toys, and playing quiet games. Many infants prefer to play with their father, but turn to their mother when distressed. Differences between mothers' and fathers' behaviors have become smaller as men and women have come to share responsibility for child care and breadwinning. And certainly there's a need to take in or keep in mind the situations where you have single mothers or a single father, and it's like then those single parents almost have to play double duty in those cases. Attachments can take different forms, which were revealed by a procedure known as the strange situation. So look at this video clip. This was an interesting experiment. It gauges how secure the relationship is between a mother and a child. What we have learned in these experiments, such as the strange situation, is there are different types of attachment that happens with children. This table gives you the sequence of events in the strange situation, which can be observed in the video clip. Based on how the infant reacts to reaction from and reunion with the mother, researchers have discovered these 4 primary types of attachment relationships. Secure attachment. The baby may or may not cry when the mother leaves, but when she returns, the baby wants to be with her. The baby is crying. It stops. Babies in this group seem to be saying, "I missed you terribly. I'm delighted to see you, but now that all is well, I'll get back to what I was doing." Approximately 60 to 65% of American babies have secure attachment relationships. Then there's avoidant attachment. The baby's not upset when the mother leaves, and when she returns may ignore her by looking or turning away. Infants with an avoidant attachment look as if they're saying, "You left me again. I always have to take care of myself." About 20% of American infants have an avoidant attachment relationship, which is one of 3 forms of insecure relationship. The next type of insecure relationship is resistant attachment. The baby is upset when the mother leaves, remains upset, even angry when she returns, and is difficult to console. These babies seem to be telling the mother, "Why did you do this? I need you desperately, yet you leave me without warning. I get so angry." About 10 to 15% of American babies have a resistant attachment relationship. And then the last form of insecure attachment is what we might call disorganized or disoriented attachment. The baby seems confused when the mother leaves and when she returns, as if not really understanding what's happening. The baby often behaves in contradictory ways, such as nearing the mother when she returns but not looking at her. Like the baby's wondering, "What's happening? I want you to be here, but you left and now you're back. I don't get what's going on." About 5 to 10% of American babies have a disorganized attachment relationship, the last of the three kinds of insecure relationship. So how does attachment carry over to peer relationships? Well, babies with secure attachment interact successfully with their preschool peers, and they have more stable and high-quality relationships in adolescence. Insecure attachments can impact social development. Disorganized attachment is linked with anxiety, anger, and aggression later on in the child's development. Secure attachment is most likely when parents respond predictably and appropriately, because this instills trust and confidence in the baby. Babies develop an internal working model, a set of expectations about parents' availability and responsiveness. But temperament can also influence attachment quality. Fussy babies combined with rigid mothers can lead to insecure attachments, and research has shown that parent training can help avoid this kind of insecure attachment. In this section now, we're going to consider emotional development, and we'll be looking at what are basic emotions and what are examples of those basic emotions. So basic emotions are joy, anger, and fear, as well as interest, disgust, distress, sadness, and surprise. Basic emotions are experienced by people worldwide. Each consists of three elements: a subjective feeling, a physiological change, and an overt behavior. Young babies experience broad positive and broad negative emotional states, but these differentiate rapidly, and by approximately 6 months of age, infants are thought to experience all the basic emotions. At 2 to 3 months of age, social smiles first appear. Infants smile when they see another human face. Sometimes social smiling is accompanied by cooing. Smiling and cooing seem to be the infant's way of expressing pleasure at seeing another person. Sadness is also observed at about this age. Infants look sad, for example, when their mothers stop playing with them. Anger is one of the first negative emotions to emerge. Typically between 4 and 6 months, infants become angry when a favorite food or toy is taken away. Older infants become angry when their attempts to achieve a goal are frustrated. If a parent restrains an infant trying to pick up a toy, the guaranteed result is a very angry baby. Fear emerges later in the first year. At about 6 months, infants become wary in the presence of an unfamiliar adult, a reaction known as stranger wariness. When a stranger approaches a 6-month-old, will typically look away and begin to be fussy. Wariness of strangers is adaptive because it emerges at the same time that children begin to master creeping and crawling. Now, complex emotions emerge around 18 to 24 months of age. This is related to the understanding of the self, which we talked about in the last chapter, which typically occurs between 15 and 18 months. Children feel guilty or embarrassed when they've done something they know they shouldn't have done. A child breaks a toy is thinking, "You told me to be careful, but I wasn't." Likewise, children feel pride when they accomplish a challenging task for the first time. Thus, children's growing understanding of themselves enables them to experience complex emotions like pride and guilt. So this chart will summarize for you then the basic emotions, which are, again, responses that are experienced by people worldwide. And that occurs from birth to 9 months. Examples of that, as we just discussed, are happiness, anger, and fear. And babies become more self-conscious beginning at 18 to 24 months. They become concerned about whether they're meeting or failing expectations or standards. And that can result in pride, guilt, or embarrassment. So as children grow cognitively and socially, emotions develop when they may not have in the past. Other emotional responses decrease. For example, in the presence of darkness, fear begins to decline. Replacing fears are concerns about school, health, personal harm. Such worries are common and not a cause for concern in most children. However, in some youngsters, they become so extreme that they are overwhelming. For example, a 7-year-old worries about school would not be unusual unless her concern grew to the point that she refused to go to school. So some anxiety, in fact, at any age, is helpful because it motivates us, energizes us to take action. But when that fear and anxiety grows to the point that it inhibits our functioning, then that is of concern. Children worldwide express many of the same basic and complex emotions. However, cultures differ in the extent to which emotional expression is encouraged. For example, American children are often quite proud of personal achievement, but Asian children would be embarrassed by such a public display of individual achievement. Infants can detect emotional facial expressions by 4 months of age. They can look at an angry face longer than a neutral face. Infants can also match their emotions to their mother's. They act happy when the mother is smiling and talking. What happens in development in early childhood is what we call social referencing. Infants use others' emotions to direct their behavior. Infants in an unfamiliar or ambiguous environment often look at their mother or father as if searching for cues to help them interpret the situation. If a parent, for example, seems frightened by an unfamiliar object, then babies also are even afraid of it, as it's trying to be demonstrated in this graphic here. So you see when the mother gets that shocked kind of worried look on her face, the baby does likewise. Now, when it comes to regulating emotions, this depends on cognitive processes. Infants begin to regulate emotions by 4 to 6 months. For example, frightened infants will move away from an object of fear and move closer to the mother. By 24 months, they realize that a sad facial expression is likely to get a response from parents. And then children learn new ways to regulate emotions. As they get older, they rely less on others to regulate their own emotions. They use mental strategies to regulate emotions. They match the strategies for regulating the emotion with the particular situation. Children who don't regulate their emotions well tend to have adjustment problems and peer difficulties. Now let's look at social relationships, how children interact with others. There are certain types of play, and play is a very important part of early childhood development. So we have parallel play, where each child plays alone but is interested in what the other is doing. Sometimes you will observe simple social play. Toddlers engage in similar activities and talk or smile at each other. That begins at 15 to 18 months. And there's cooperative play. Play takes on a distinct theme and children play roles. This begins around the age of 2. Think of some examples of children engaging in cooperative play. One example here is having tea parties. What are some other examples where you may have observed children in cooperative play? Make-believe progresses from the concrete to the abstract as children get older. What objects might a child use to play school? Ponder that question. Now, benefits of make-believe play are that cognitive development is promoted. It allows children to explore topics that frighten them. So think about how children might engage in some kind of make-believe play that might be a little scary, but yet help them to learn to explore something that might be frightening. And having imaginary friends is linked to children being more social. So it is not at all to be of any concern when you see children engaging in imaginary friends. Preschoolers also choose solitary play, like coloring, doing puzzles, playing with Legos. But there's 2 types of unhealthy solitary play. So if you see children wandering aimlessly, just going from one activity to the next without any focus of attention, that needs to be investigated. Or hovering, watching other children play but not engaging with them. So children may need professional help if they engage in these 2 types of play. At 2 to 3 years of age, children prefer to play with same-sex peers. Children do this on their own spontaneously. They will resist typically playing with members of the other sex. They choose to play with members of the same sex even in gender-neutral activities, for example, like doing puzzles. So why do children prefer to play with the same-sex peers? Well, boys and girls, styles of play differ. Boys prefer competition, girls cooperation. Girls do not readily influence boys during play. Girls typically use enabling actions to support interaction. Boys use constricting actions to create competition. Playing and learning from the same sex reinforces gender differences. It's also important for parents to become involved in children's play. So parents can do this by acting as a playmate and helping to advance the play, setting up social activities and visits with other children, coaching children to acquire conflict resolution and decision-making skills. But coaching must be from a constructive aspect for children to benefit, and parents can act as a mediator when children have conflicts. So when coaching as a parent, you need to help children to acquire skills to become more competent socially and more accepted by peers. Coaching does need to be constructive, though, for children to benefit. Parent coaches sometimes make suggestions that aren't clear or are even misguided. Bad coaching is worse than no coaching because bad coaching can harm children's peer relationships. And when acting as a mediator, sometimes parents will need to help children when they're disagreeing, arguing, and fighting. So parents can be present to help iron out difficulties, and when young children can't agree on what to play, a parent can help negotiate a mutually acceptable activity. Prosocial behavior is any behavior that benefits another person. Cooperation, that is, working toward a common goal, is the one form of prosocial behavior. Cooperation often works because individuals gain more than they would by not cooperating. But there is also altruism, behavior driven by feelings of responsibility toward other people, such as helping and sharing, in which individuals do not necessarily benefit from their actions. When two children pool their funds to buy a candy bar, for example, to share, this is cooperative behavior. When one child gives half of her lunch to a peer who forgot her own lunch, that is an example of altruism. And that altruistic behavior will become more advanced as children learn about other needs. Children are more likely to engage in altruistic behavior as they get older and become less egocentric. Children are more likely to respond if they feel empathy for another. Certain settings can impact altruistic behavior, such as giving a child a feeling of responsibility, helping a child to develop feelings of competence. A child's mood can affect altruism. So a child will act more altruistically when they're happy or feeling successful, but not when they're sad or feeling as if they failed. A preschool child who has spent time in a class, for example, as the leader, like in nursery school, might be more inclined to share treats with others and even with their own siblings than is a preschooler who is punished by the teacher. And when it comes to the cost of altruism, children act altruistically when it costs them little. A preschool child who is given a snack that she doesn't particularly like is more inclined to share it with others than one who has given her her favorite food. So children are most likely to help when they feel responsible for the person in need, have the needed skills, are happy, and believe that they have little to lose. Genes may also affect prosocial behavior by influencing temperament. Children who can't regulate emotions may help less because they're too upset themselves to even help somebody else. They can't even help themselves. Shy children also are less likely to help, especially those they don't know well. They may know how to help, but may feel too inhibited to do so. How can parents influence altruism? Well, by modeling. When children see adults helping and caring for others, they will often imitate such prosocial behavior. Like when a parent is helpful and responsive, the children often imitate that parent by being cooperative, helpful, sharing, and less critical of others. Disciplinary practices. Children behave prosocially more often when their parents are warm and supportive, set guidelines, and provide feedback. On the other hand, prosocial behavior is less common when parenting is harsh, threatening, and includes frequent physical punishment. And then parents can give children opportunities to behave prosocially. Children and adolescents are more likely to act prosocially when they're routinely given the opportunity to help and cooperate with others, such as allowing the children to help with household tasks. Experiences like these help sensitize children to the needs of others and at the same time help them to enjoy the satisfaction of helping. Here then is a table which summarizes what I've been talking about in terms of factors contributing to children's prosocial behavior. Let's consider now gender roles and gender identity. A social role is a set of cultural guidelines as how a person is to behave. Children learn about roles associated with gender beginning in infancy. Children begin to identify as a boy or girl at the same time as they are learning gender roles. There are gender stereotypes, that's beliefs and images about males and females that may or may not be true. Knowing a person's gender lends to making inferences about behavior and personality. So, for example, many men and women believe that males are rational, active, independent, competitive, and aggressive. At the same time, many men and women claim that females are emotional, passive, defensive, sensitive, and gentle. Based on gender stereotypes, we expect male and females to act and feel in particular ways, and so we respond to their behavior differently depending on their gender. So if you see a toddler playing with a doll, then you would probably assume that she is a girl based on her taste in toys. Once you assume the child is a girl, your gender stereotypes lead to numerous inferences about behavior and personality. So, by 18 months, children will begin to show a preference for gender stereotyped toys, such as trucks for boys and dolls for girls, and a lot of that may be influenced by the stereotypes that they have been influenced by. Many gender stereotypes are not true, but some actual differences do exist between males and females. In terms of verbal ability, girls generally have greater verbal ability from toddler years through high school. Males only have a slight advantage in countries with a gender-neutral approach to education when it comes to mathematics. And in terms of spatial abilities, males tend to have better spatial skills, even in infancy. On spatial ability tasks, which involve visualizing information in different orientations, males tend to respond more rapidly and more accurately than females. When it comes to social influence, girls are more likely to listen to adults' directions and agree with a group's decision. On the other hand, boys show more aggression, especially physical aggression beginning at 17 months. Girls tend to engage more in relational aggression, hurting others by damaging their relationships with peers. So girls may be more likely to call other children names, make fun of them, spread rumors about them, or just ignore them. When it comes to emotional sensitivity, girls are often better able to express their emotions and interpret others' emotions. Throughout infancy and childhood, girls identify facial expressions more accurately than boys. And in their interactions with peers, girls are more empathetic. They're better able to feel how other children and adolescents are feeling. Children learn gender roles from their parents and the world around them. Parents encourage gender-related behavior in their children. For example, parents tend to encourage girls to play with dolls and boys to play football. Fathers tend to respond to children based on the gender stereotypes I've been discussing, but mothers are more likely to focus on children's individual needs. Children tend to engage in more gender-related behavior when parents have traditional roles of gender. Same-sex play with peers also strengthens gender differences. Children begin to identify with one group and form a gender identity. They develop a sense of being male or female. So, this early segregation of playmates based on child's gender means that boys learn primarily from boys and girls learn primarily from girls. This helps solidify a youngster's emerging sense of membership in a particular gender group and sharpens the contrast between their gender and the other gender. So through encouraging words, critical looks, and other forms of praise and punishment, other people influence boys and girls to behave differently. However, children learn more than just the specific behaviors associated with their gender. A child gradually begins to identify with one group and develop a gender identity, a sense of self as male or female. Well, a full understanding of gender emerges in 3 steps. Children can label themselves as a boy or girl by age 2 or 3. Preschoolers begin to understand that boys will become men and girls will become women. By ages 4 to 7, children understand that one cannot change gender based on clothes they wear or activities they do. According to gender schema theory, children decide whether an object, activity, or behavior is for females or males before learning more about the objects, activities, or behaviors that are appropriate for their gender. So this graphic is trying to illustrate for you what happens according to the gender schema theory. So you have a doll, and you're trying to determine whether that is for you or not if you are a girl. If you're a boy, then you're going to say, that's not for me, and avoid playing with that doll. If you're a girl, you're going to say, oh, that's for me, and you're going to approach and learn more about that doll. Biology also contributes to gender roles and gender identity. Men and women have performed vastly different roles for much of human history. Women traditionally were more invested in child rearing, and men were more invested in providing important resources for their offspring. And adapting to these roles, different traits and behaviors evolved for men and women. For example, men became more aggressive because that was adaptive in helping warding off predators. If gender roles are based in part on our evolutionary heritage, then behavior genetic research should show the impact of heredity on gender role learning. Indeed, twin studies show a substantial hereditary impact on gender role learning. The exact mechanism may be prenatal exposure to testosterone, which has a masculinizing influence on children's activities and interest. But gender roles have changed with the times. In the United States, the range of acceptable roles for girls and boys and women and men has never been greater than today. For example, some fathers stay home to be primary caregivers for children, and some mothers work full-time as sole support for the family. What is the impact of these changes on gender roles? Some insights come from the results of the Family Lifestyles Project, which examined families of adults who were members of the counterculture of the 1960s and 1970s and who were deeply committed to living gender-neutral lives and to rearing children without traditional gender stereotypes. In these families, men and women shared household, financial, and child care tasks. This little cartoon here gets at how gender roles are changing. Oh, are those roles? Yep, my wife baked them this morning. They're traditional gender roles. These are pretty awful. Yeah, she should leave the cooking to me, the guy concludes. How has less emphasis on traditional gender roles influenced American children? Children who grow up without gender stereotypes show some different beliefs and behaviors. They still have same-sex friends and enjoy sex-typed activities like other children, but they show fewer stereotypes regarding occupations and objects. For example, men and women are equally likely now to use an ironing board. And that's all for this presentation, but I would like for you to consider at this point How have roles changed from being traditional for men and women? And do you think women are making progress as you observe what's going on in society today? Or are we beginning to regress? Are gender roles making progress, or are there still some barriers that women in particular need to face? So those are important questions just to consider as you think not only about early childhood development, but your own development as well. So that concludes an overview of Chapter 5 for Psychology 230.